Spider-Man in the Boys universe isn't just a crossover, it's a collision. We all know he's a symbol of hope, morality, and responsibility, but having him dropped off into a world where heroes are anything but heroic would just be purely chaotic. In a place where capes and corporate assets are basically just intermingled, and the good guys aren't in rarely any existence and very much in short supply, how does Peter Parker survive? And more importantly, how does he manage to change everything? Let's dive deep into how this web-slinging menace that we all know J. Jonah Jameson loves to call him would actively just go into this world, and what would happen if this wall crawler showed up into the Boys universe. Now, before we actively get started into the video, let's just go over a little bit of background information, and if we're being honest, we don't really need to do this, but just in case you don't know who Spider-Man is, we'll just explain that now. So, unless you just, live under a rock, most people probably know that Peter Parker is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, a brilliant young mind bitten with a radioactive spider and gifted with incredible powers. But what truly defines him isn't just his strength, agility, and web shooters, it's his code. With great power comes great responsibility, a mantra that has guided him through battles between gods, aliens, multiversal threats, and so many other copious nonsense that it's truly inspiring. But none of that really prepares him for the cold commercial world of the Vought International Enterprises and the very big difference that he would be having to be put in if he is set in foot of the Boys world and universe landscape as a whole. Now, with all of that said and done, let's actively get started off into explaining how him entering the Boys universe would work. And as we all know, Spider-Man is no slouch and no newbie to being brought into a multiversal situation where he's just dropped into another universe and has to, deal with something like that, whether it's Spider-Verse or whatever. So he been down this rodeo before. So whether we just say that this happens via a multiversal accident where maybe Stark Tech experiments pulls him into this brutal reality with the sky, still being blue, but the heroes being terrifyingly different comparatively to what he's used to, he would have to very quickly orient himself around and eventually figure out that Vought controls everything, from the media to the heroes to the very perception of what's right and wrong. And this would very much just be Peter being like, he's going to be stuck here for at least a little while in case like somebody else comes out, finds him, or he might just be stuck here permanently. He doesn't really know, and it could really go either way. But Peter being Peter is just going to do what he always does. He tries to help, maybe stopping a robbery, saving a bus, but instead of gratitude, he'd be approached by Vought's PR agents offering him a contract and a costume redesign, which he would refuse because, he prefers kind of being that neighborhood Spider-Man. And yes, we've seen him on the Avengers, so the possibility of him joining the Seven would exist, but it's still Peter, so I don't see him just trying to be like, oh, this entire new hero team that I've never heard of, let me just join automatically. He's too smart for that. Next off, he would most likely eventually hear just the word about there being at least another web slinger about, and this would be the first thing that kind of makes somewhat sense to him. Another Spider-Man variant just existing in the world, makes sense due to just the multiversal travel and just being kind of another pseudo version of Spider-Verse situation that he's dealt with before and just kind of meeting another variant of himself. So he would figure out more about his alternate universe version of himself known as Webweaver. And this would be a very big situation of, we all know, Spider-Man's not the only Spider-Man here. Like, Peter Parker's not the only Spider-ish man here. We have Webweaver, this universe's twisted reflection on what Spider-Man might have become in a world ruled by addiction, power, and lies. Webweaver was a promising hero, charismatic, capable, and beloved by the public, but fame got him. Vought pushed him too hard, branding him as the next, like Gen Spidey with swagger, of A-Train, the Edge of Black Noir, whatever kind of things you might want to call it, and just, completely just glamored and enamored with his own kind of character. But we see how he is in the show, and we see kind of the kind of person that he is. He's a broken man, an addict chasing the next high, once celebrated, now the shadow of what possibly could have been. And one of the more tragic twists is that he even confesses to being the mole, like leaking information to the boys, not because he is, but just due to the fact that as a desperate ploy to get sent home just to get a score on another fix. Peter would probably eventually meet him and see his worst kind of case scenario version of himself. Obviously, not Peter Parker, but just a worst case scenario of just a Spider Man esque person. And this guilt would be immediate, but the resolve would be so much stronger. It would really just show him that this world isn't just in need of saving, it is in need of a reminder of what a real hero truly looks like and what it truly means to be a hero. So, this would start Spider Man's journey on trying to truly figure out the ins and outs of this world and actively create a situation where heroes can truly be good in this world after figuring out all of the stuff that heroes do be getting up to. He would probably start off working in the shadows, maybe landing a low-level tech job in like Vought towers, or hacking his way into servers and decrypting hidden footage, building his own, surveillance network using old drones and scraps, just tracking down the Seven's movements because he obviously would probably smell something fishy just throughout the entirety of the Seven. Every day, basically uncovering more and more bribed politicians, whistleblowers, neighborhoods cleansed by unstable soups, and literally figuring out more and more atrocious things that are going on within the entirety of the Vought ecosystem. And we all know how Vought's gonna just be trying to control the narrative, offering him everything. Fame, resources, even a spot on the Seven. They probably even pitch him the next pitch him as the next big thing. The Spider sensation. Friendly, marketable, clean. And Peter would be horrified. He'd refuse so heavily because this isn't the kind of person that he is. So they would probably try smearing him and smearing his entire reputation and anything. And obviously, Peter's still being Peter, so he's smart enough to make sure that they do not know who he is. And there isn't any character that I could automatically think of that has X-ray vision that can just be like, oh, boom, let me just see exactly who this face is. And even then, they wouldn't be able to use any facial recognition because he's not from your universe. So you're going to basically maybe see his face and maybe see his face around a couple buildings, but you're not going to know his name because he doesn't exist. So all they would be trying to do is just pitch that to Spider-Man, not Peter. And that would be his best benefit in this world whatsoever, especially if he's not from the world. If he's from the world, it's a little different and he's born there and born with Compound V, but we're not doing that kind of situation because that makes it a lot less interesting in terms of story-wise. But it just becomes very interesting because of the fact that we know what Vought would do. They would try to smear him. They would try painting him as a menace, a rogue element, a threat to national security, the same way that he's portrayed by the media and J. Jonah Jameson in his own world. And when that doesn't work, they would most definitely send the muscle. So this would be the beginning of Spider-Man versus the Seven. And let's not kid ourselves here. Peter is used to being outmatched, but this time he'd adapt fast, very, very quickly. Where Homelander relies on fear, overwhelming strength, and basically just being so over the toply stronger than everybody in his own world. The Marvel Universe is a completely different breed, first of all, and Peter alone is a very different entity from what Homelander has ever had to deal with. Peter relies on that creativity, that speed, that strategy that he has so much in abundance that he's not going to even be trying to survive anymore. He's just planning to win. A-Train would probably get taken down first, caught mid-run in a high-tension web trap laced with kinetic absorbing tech that Peter has rigged from stolen Vought gear. The Deep tries to drown him in an ambush, but Peter would just see that coming because, Spidey sense, you're not going to touch him in the first place. None of them are going to be able to touch him. So he'd electrify the water, knocking the Deep unconscious and basically just leaving him in his own element. Black Noir, yes, lethal, silent, and tactical, but Peter's unpredictability, spider sense, and custom traps would turn Noir's stealth into a liability. Peters would most likely lure him into a webbed corridor rigged with sonic feedback trap loops and whatever, disorienting him long enough for a clean takedown. And we all know Spider-Man's got hands and fairly high strength. So Black Noir probably would be able to get somewhat injured, or at least very decently injured by Spider-Man alone. And then, like, obviously, you have like people like Queen Maeve and whatever. So this would be a very big situation, but she still gets taken down by Spidey because not anybody here is fast enough to actually take down Spidey or at least touch him in the first place. And even when we get to the main event, like Homelander, Peter doesn't just win this fight, he owns the entirety of the battlefield. He'd use every rooftop, every alley, every shadow to his own betterment. His probably going to make an upgraded suit that utilizes energy and like whatever, just like technology from this world, that a suit that would basically absorb energy blasts, because we all know Peter Parker is extremely intelligent and with very limited supplies that he could possibly work out, especially once he spends long enough time here figuring out, this is Homelander, these are his abilities. He'd probably be able to very easily and fairly quickly create a suit that does absorb some kind of energy blast, or at least absorbs heat in some specific way just in case. And his webbing would probably end up reinforced with a polymer designed to, like a compound polymer just designed to resist Homelander's strength for very crucial seconds. He moves faster, hits smarter specifically, and very much forces Homelander into a rage, which very much isn't hard. And in that rage, Homelander is going to be very easily able to make mistakes. Peter would be able to counteract every single attack. Webs just in his eyes shut shut down mid laser attacks, mid battle, and this very much leads him into a very direct, massive electromagnetic trap, not to kill but expose. And with Homelander pinned and disoriented, Peter activates the one thing that he knows best: being a journalist, being a photographer, being in just the kind of news area media. And he would activate a broadcast sequence rigged to live stream across all of America, like all of the dirt, Compound V, civilian deaths, blackmail, all of it. And while the whole world watches, Spider-Man stands over Homelander and delivers the knockout punch that isn't just physical, it's the truth. Homelander doesn't just lose this fight, he loses the control that he has. And for the first time, he's vulnerable, not just to punches, but to public opinion. And we all know he's always been like, what do you do when I have nothing left to lose? The main difference is, now there's somebody here to stop him. There's somebody here strong enough and specifically agile enough to not get hit and just avoid him very well enough that even if Homelander tried doing anything, he's not going to be able to beat Spider-Man in the first place. So Spider-Man just doesn't defeat the Seven. He beats them to a complete, utter point that he resets the entire world balance and the world order that we knew at any given point in time. Now, obviously, having him in the world would be very interesting on the opposite end of the spectrum, just specifically talking about the actual boys' crew. So this would be the more, as I said, interesting bit, because we obviously know that if Peter gets introduced into this world and keeps his identity secret, but is actively going against Vought, he'd probably meet Grace Mallory and he'd be introduced to Butcher, which he would not get along with, if we're being fair, just due to the fact that Butcher's a lot more too chaotic in any very major terms. So it would not be a very close-knit friendship. Him and Huey probably get along fairly decently, but Butcher on his end would be very suspicious at first. He calls Peter a Vought plant. Just keeps his distance. Kimiko's intrigued, and Huey sees someone who actually reminds him of what a superhero should be in any specific, kind of point of it. And then Starlight would just be one of those people that actively sees someone that is the same kind of person as her. Somebody that's actually trying to do the best job that they can. Eventually, grudging respect and actively fool things like that build, and Peter starts sharing his intel, helping the boys get in and out of black sites, and it becomes a thorn through Vought's side. And unlike Butcher, he doesn't actively lose himself in the war. He refuses to kill. He keeps a line of him just like completely human, and sometimes it even reminds the boys of who they're supposed to be, who they used to be. So I really see a very just weird interaction between him and them, because I do not see him working with them very often. He is very much capable enough to just get the job done by himself, but the boys kind of have their uses in very specific circumstances. And as I said, he'd get along with at least two of the people, specifically just Huey and Starlight, so he'd be able to use their part of the relationship a lot more than anything else. But no matter what, Spider-Man's influence on the entirety of the boys' world in general would be very, very, huge. His presence would start to shift public perception. Underground forums light up with footage of his unsanctioned resources and rescues. Fan art spreads, kids start drawing up spiders on their backpacks, spider symbol graffiti starts popping up in alleyways and subways, and he truly becomes that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man even in this world. People truly rallying to him because they're seeing a hero that's actively doing this without taking any credit, without trying to be monetized for it. Somebody that's truly being a hero that is, an actual hero. I said the exact same thing with my Doctor Strange video that I did with What If Doctor Strange Was in the Boys, with a very similar premise. Just due to the fact of, Peter is a very different kind of person. He is a very different kind of person from any person in the entirety of the Boys universe. So it would be so very interesting to see what could possibly happen. And Vought would obviously probably try scrambling to spin the entire narrative, especially after what he would do to the entirety of the Seven. They'd accuse him of terrorism, forged footage, fabricate crimes, but the damage would already be done, and the information that Peter would probably be able to gather would actually be ironclad. So Peter Parker, anonymous web slinger, would become an absolute symbol. Spider-Man specifically, not of power, but of actual resistance and, truth. Meanwhile, his tech gets repurposed. Communities use his sensors to warn of soup threats. His research into Compound V sparks real science, and the real entire behind the scenes, movement truly begins. One driven by courage, not contracts. And this would be just the actual, beginning of this mountain that could possibly be driven out. So, what if Spider-Man was in the boys? He'd be an absolute game changer. A hero who refuses to break, even with the world completely against him. He'd be a hero who actively, truly tries to fighting the corruption the same way that he always has done, and Peter Parker would be there to inspire change. And maybe, just maybe, he'd remind this broken world what true heroism looks like and actively set upon a new age of people actually trying to be heroes. But, thanks for watching the video. If you guys did enjoy this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more multiversal madness and what ifs like this, and let me know down in the comments who should step into the boys universe next. Until the next time, stay safe out there, and remember, just because you wear the cape doesn't mean you're the good guys, so maybe choose who your favorite hero is a little more carefully sometimes, just in case. But I will see you all in the next video. Peace.